And so inflation is up again after it went down in July. The head of the Moroccan Public-Private Partnership, Said Moualem, has described as significant the US and China's ratification of the COP21 Paris Agreement on climate change. The two economic giants ratified the pact after years of reluctance. Mr. Moualem says their ratification puts pressure on other big polluters to ratify the deal. US and China emit 40% of the world's carbons. The Paris Agreement, COP21, sailed in December 2015 after 2 weeks of intense negotiations, needs to be ratified by 55 countries, representing 55% of global emissions, in order to come into effect. US and China's ratification brings to 48% the number of countries that have ratified so far. Although China and the US together account for about 40% of global emissions, the two have not been committed to previous climate change agreement, given the effect a cut on carbon emissions will have on their economy. China still derives over 70% of its electricity from coal and produces about 24% of global carbon emissions. The ratification of the agreement by the two giants, according to Mr. Said Moualem, gives impetus to the pact.
We know the history of the COPs, and to have such involvement from those two big countries that were very skeptical before to sign even the Kyoto Protocol, and that's something very strong. So we have to be very glad of that.
Speaking at a pre-COP22 conference that sought to enlighten some 55 African journalists on latest trends and updates in climate change, Mr. Moualem called on African governments to see climate change as a job creation opportunity rather than a threat. He noted that Morocco at the moment repairs 70% of the spare parts in its wind energy sector.
Renewable energy projects is not only projects of producing energy. It's also to develop jobs in our countries. It's also a matter of, course, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions, but also creating jobs, developing industries, and developing social impact.
Just like most African climate change experts, he is worried about the low climate change funding that Africa receives.
When we're talking about the Green Fund, we're talking about also $100 billion every year to be put for climate change. We believe that the big needs are for adaptation and to help the population with that. So that's what I want to tell you, the role of the private sector, why it's important, and why we believe that the southern private sector can play a key role in those projects.
The Paris Agreement aims to keep global warming below the critical thresholds of 2 or even 1.5 degrees Celsius.